to please put your board somewhere to dry. So you might want to put it right in front or even just behind your chair or somewhere where it can dry while we're going to talk about drawing. So I'm going to put mine on the floor there. Okay, so the difference between powder paint and the acrylic drawing ink is the acrylic drawing ink gives a little bit of a sheen, and you also have to use the sunlight liquid soap. So it does give it possibly a slightly, glossier look. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about drawing. So drawing is often terrified for learners who haven't done it before, and people often tend to say, oh, I can't draw. The truth of the matter is everybody can learn to draw. There are actually ways of seeing and ways of practicing. It really is a case of learning how to see and putting in the time. And some people are naturally skilled at that quite quickly, and other people take a bit longer. But the bottom line is everybody can learn to draw. So that's what you have to tell your learners, because that's the first thing that stops people from doing art. I can't draw, because somebody's better than them. Okay, so you are going to get different levels of drawing, and I'm going to ask you to ask your learners not to compare, and rather to explain to them that some people take longer than others, but everybody can get there. So, by now you've got your still life object in front of you, and it's on a cloth. And learning to see the object, we can look at it in different ways. But the first thing I'd like you to look at is the light source. So it's a little bit tricky in a room like this because you've got light coming from there, you've got light coming from above. There's actually light coming from all over the place. But nevertheless, you're still going to see parts of it that are lighter. You're still going to see areas where there's shines, areas where there's shadows, and specifically in the cloth, you can see light bits and dark bits. So I'd like you to first have a look, just observe your object in terms of tone. Tonal contrast. I want you to look and see if you can find the darkest shadows. Those should be the parts that are almost black. And then look at the lightest areas. Some of you have got shiny objects. Some of you have got matte objects, but you'll still see very light areas. Can you see the lightest areas? Can everybody see a light source? So in other words, where is the light coming from? So if you've got, them in a room like this, you might have a few light areas, but can you kind of see where the light is coming from and where the shadow is on your cloth? So we're looking with the eyes of tone. Now, the one thing about scrapperboards is it's a little bit tricky because there's no grey. You've either got black or white. So if you look at your object and you look at all the medium tones from the lightest lights to the darkest darks, you're going to have lots of different mediums. So how do we get the mediums with scrapperboards? We have to get it with texture. So the texture can either be the cross-hatching, or it can be the scratching, or it can be the stippling, but you're going to get grey some other how than colouring in grey. Okay. So I think the first thing we're going to look at is if you could find your texture paper and the practice one. Now you've got a choice as a teacher. I've actually chosen to give you this plus a pencil, and we're going to take a few minutes today just to practice the different techniques. We've got hatching, cross-hatching, contouring, scribbles, etc. So the things that you can do in drawing to create texture. Texture is how something feels. In our case, it's not just how something feels, it's also to create tone. So the same textures that you get in drawing with a pencil, you can scratch into the scrapperboard. So take a couple of minutes and just do your own way of stippling, contouring, and we're literally just going to take about 5 minutes. So the learners can take longer. What you might want to do, it's another idea, is you could get them to do 2 scraper boards, and then they could actually practice the texturing on the scraper board itself. So that's another option. The examples in the little squares actually go from dark to light. So you're using the texture drawing examples to create tone. So you're not just practicing stippling, you're practicing stippling, which is the dots, going from dark to light. Now there are different ways of approaching how to draw a still life. But somehow, we need to help the learners to become more comfortable with getting the still life onto the scrapperboard. If one leaves learners who are lacking in confidence or lacking in experience, they will do a tiny little thing in the middle of the scrapperboard, and that will be the still life, because it's natural. We all do that when we are feeling insecure about something. So the first thing is to explain to the learners that they ideally, there are always exceptions in art, but in this exercise, remember we are focusing on the grades 7 to 2. Saying that, this can be for any of the grades from grade 4 right up to matric, as you can see. So the idea is that they keep in mind that the object should be more or less 80%, so 80% of the paper. So it's going to be quite big on their scraper board with just a small border. So how does one get them to feel confident with getting this 80% onto this paper? The exercise that I described as terrifying is contour drawing, and it really can be quite terrifying when you're not used to it, continuous contour drawing, but I honestly believe that it is the best way of learning how to see. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you become with it, and the more you're able to see what is really there. So we're actually going to look at the drawing exercises from 2 different sides. We're going to look from, let's call it the right side of the brain, and we're going to look from the left side of the brain. So the right side of the brain is we're actually becoming one with our object, and we're going to be drawing it quickly using one continuous line. And we're doing this just to get an idea of the size and the shape and the proportion of this object. So this is not a standard way of approaching scrapperboards. I'm just suggesting it because I think it's a good way of getting an idea of the object. If you were to say to the learners, okay, take your pencil and do a sketch, most of my learners would sit the whole lesson to try and do this perfect pencil drawing. That's not the idea. We want to get it onto the scrapperboard. So, with a contour drawing, you're going to ask them in 2 minutes and then in 4 minutes they're going to do 2 drawings. Very importantly, they're not going to be judged. That's important. And nobody's even necessary, they're not going to show it to the rest of the class, they're just doing this to get an idea of their object. So the 2-minute one, so let's say I've got a cup, and I want it to be more or less 18. Now contour drawing means one, maybe I see a shine, it's one continuous line. They're not necessarily outlining, they're just getting an idea of the size that they want the cup to be. There's my 2-minute drawing. Speed is a friend because it stops perfectionism, it stops people being terrified, it just gets them to get an idea of what it's going to look like on this scrapperboard. You want to try? Are you ready? So it's one continuous line. Just a tip, and this is a good tip for the learners, they might get stuck in one area at the top, and after 2 minutes they have to stand that. So you must tell them the whole object needs to be covered. And a contour drawing means they can go up the side, up, around, down, back. It's like a ball of wool that's unfolding. They're not just doing the outline. Okay, so I'm going to time 2 minutes, and I'm going to ask you to capture this object in 2 minutes with your pencil. You're lucky you've got a pencil. I had a black marker. I normally give black